A pregnant single mother accidentally calls for help and awakens the heart of a millionaire. A simple mistake that changes everything. A story of love and hope. Get ready. This story will move you. Subscribe and leave your like. The rain hammered against the windows of the small apartment in Brooklyn with an intensity that seemed to echo Sarah Johnson's despair. Sitting on the edge of the twin bed she shared with a mountain of clothes to iron, she held a crumpled piece of paper between her trembling fingers. The number was nearly illegible, smudged by humidity and the sweat of her nervous hands. 6 months of pregnancy weighed not only on her round belly, but on every fibre of her exhausted being. "Please, let someone answer," she murmured to herself, dialing the numbers with desperate precision. The 40-square-foot apartment smelled of frying food from the diner downstairs, mixed with the sweet aroma of the 24-hour bakery on the corner. Through the thin walls, she could hear the neighbor's baby crying incessantly, a sound that made her question whether she was ready for the impending motherhood. Sarah was 28, with wavy brown hair that fell over her slender shoulders and green eyes that contrasted with her sun-kissed skin. Even pregnant and exhausted, there was a steely determination in her gaze, a trait that had helped her survive since she left home at 17. Her calloused hands from working as a night cleaner trembled as she held the old phone she had bought used on 86th Street. On the other side of the city, in a luxurious 32nd floor apartment on the Upper East Side, David Thompson paced restlessly through his 300-square-foot apartment. At 42, he had an imposing presence, 6 feet tall, black hair sprinkled with grey at the temples, and brown eyes that reflected a sharp intelligence honed over years of building a business empire. He wore a navy blue polo shirt and khaki pants, casual clothes that cost more than the monthly salary of many people. David's apartment was a testament to his success. Hardwood floors, contemporary art on the walls, and a panoramic view of New York that stretched as far as the eye could see. But on that rainy morning, all that opulence felt empty. For 3 years, since the death of his wife Emily in a car accident, the place had become more of a mausoleum than a home. The phone rang, cutting through the heavy silence of the apartment. David frowned. It was 2:15 in the morning, and calls at this hour usually meant business emergencies. His investment and real estate empire operated across different time zones, and financial crises did not respect the biological clock. "Hello?" he answered with a deep, controlled voice, characteristic of someone used to making decisions that moved millions of dollars. On the other end of the line, Sarah felt her heart race upon hearing the unfamiliar male voice. For a moment, she almost hung up. But the pile of bills on the coffee table, 3 months overdue rent, a red utility bill, accumulated medical consultations, prevented her from backing down. "Please don't hang up," she said, her voice choked with tears. "I know it must sound crazy to call a stranger in the middle of the night, but I have no one else. I'm 6 months pregnant, and I'm being evicted tomorrow. Today, actually." David stopped pacing. The vulnerability in the woman's voice hit him like a punch to the gut. This was not a call about stock market actions or international contracts. It was something much more human and desperate. "I'm sorry, but I think you dialed the wrong number," he replied, trying to maintain a professional tone but unable to completely mask the concern that had settled in his voice. "I know it's the wrong number," Sarah exploded, frustrations accumulated over months finally finding an outlet. "I found this number in the pocket of a pair of pants I washed at the laundromat where I worked before I got fired. It must belong to someone important, someone with money. I thought maybe you could lend me something. I promise I'll pay you back when I get another job." David sat down on the Italian leather sofa, the phone pressed against his ear. There was something in the brutal honesty of that woman that completely disarmed him. In his corporate world, people always wanted something from him, but rarely admitted their needs with such transparency. "What's your name?" he asked, surprised by his own question. "Sarah Johnson." The answer came with a stifled sob. "Look, I know how this sounds, a crazy woman calling in the middle of the night asking for money, but I've worked since I was 15. I've never asked anyone for anything. It's just that now I don't know what to do anymore." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of rain falling over the city. David looked out the panoramic window, seeing the lights of New York shining through the night fog, while Sarah counted the seconds, mentally preparing herself to hear the busy signal. "Sarah," David finally said, his voice softer, "you said you're 6 months pregnant?" "Yes. Twins, I found out last week. The father, he disappeared when he found out." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. "He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that I should handle the situation on my own." David closed his eyes, remembering Emily and the plans they had to start a family. The irony was cruel. A man who desperately wanted children, hearing about another who had rejected them. "Where are you now?" "At home. I mean, for a few more hours, it will still be my home. Brooklyn, near the subway." Sarah looked around the small space that had been her refuge for 2 years. "It's not much, but it's mine. It was mine." David stood up and walked to the window, watching the raindrops trickle down the glass. Each drop seemed to carry a memory of Emily, who always encouraged him to use his fortune to help others. "Do good without looking at whom," she used to say, quoting the proverb she learned from her Portuguese grandmother. "Sarah, I'm going to help you." The words slipped out before he could fully process them. On the other end of the line, Sarah nearly dropped the phone. "What? Why? You don't even know me." "No, I don't know you, but I know desperation. I know the feeling of having nowhere to turn." David took a deep breath. "I'll deposit money into your account tomorrow, enough to cover your rent and pay for the medical appointments you need." Sarah fell silent for a long moment, processing the unexpected generosity. Part of her wanted to reject the help. Her independence had been her only constant in life. But looking at her growing belly and the mounting bills, pride felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because I believe every child deserves to be born in safety, and every mother deserves dignity during pregnancy." David paused, struggling with his own emotions. "And because my wife always said that money only has value when it's used to create value in the lives of others." The tears Sarah had tried to hold back throughout the conversation finally fell freely. They were no longer tears of despair, but of a relief so profound it was almost painful. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. Just take care of yourself and the babies." David looked at the picture of Emily on the side table, feeling as if she were smiling at, or him. "It will be okay, Sarah. I promise." When they finally hung up, both stayed awake until dawn, each in their respective worlds, processing the unexpected encounter that had changed something fundamental in their lives. Sarah, for the first time in months, fell asleep without the weight of despair on her chest. David, on the other hand, felt a spark of purpose he hadn't experienced since his wife's death. Outside, the rain began to lessen, and New York prepared for a new day. The dawn brought with it the familiar aroma of toasted bread and fresh coffee wafting up from the ground floor, mingling with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Sarah woke up on the sofa bed, where she had fallen asleep with the phone still in her hands, momentarily questioning whether the midnight conversation had been just a desperate dream. Reality returned when her cell phone vibrated with a banking notification that made her sit up abruptly, ignoring the twinge in her lower back. Deposit received, $15,000. The tears came again, but this time they were different. Sarah pressed her hands against her belly, feeling the little morning kicks of the twins, and whispered, "You have a guardian angel. My loves, Mommy doesn't know who he is, but he exists." On the other side of the city, David had been at the office for 2 hours, even though it was only 7 in the morning. The commercial building on Fifth Avenue was still practically empty, just a few workaholics like him occupying the upper floors. His office on the 35th floor was a reflection of his personality, minimalist yet impactful. A mahogany desk dominated the center, flanked by Italian leather chairs. The walls displayed diplomas from Harvard Business School and other prestigious institutions, along with photos with influential politicians and business leaders. "Claudio," he called on the intercom, addressing his personal assistant who always arrived at 6:30. "Yes, Mr. Thompson? I need you to discreetly hire a private investigator, someone of utmost trust." David drummed his fingers on the desk, a habit he had developed when making important decisions. "I want him to monitor a young woman named Sarah Johnson in Brooklyn, not to spy on her, but to ensure she is safe and has everything she needs." Claudio Ferreira was a 50-year-old, slender, meticulous man who had worked for David for a decade. He had developed the skill of not asking questions about his boss's more eccentric decisions, especially since Emily's death. "Understood, sir. Any specific instructions?" "If she needs anything, medical appointments, medications, proper food, you must provide it immediately, but anonymously. She cannot know it comes from me." David stood up and walked to the window, watching the morning bustle of the city. "And Claudio? I want weekly reports on how she is doing." Meanwhile, Sarah was at the bank on the corner, still incredulous about the numbers in her account. The employee, a middle-aged woman with thick glasses and a professional smile, confirmed the deposit for the third time. "Yes, Ms. Johnson, $15,000 were deposited at 3:47 this morning. The sender chose to remain anonymous." "Is that possible? Anonymous deposits of that amount?" "It's uncommon, but legal. Some people prefer to make donations anonymously for personal reasons." The employee watched her with barely concealed curiosity. "Are you expecting any deposits?" Sarah shook her head, still processing the unexpected generosity. "It's complicated." In the following weeks, Sarah's life began to change in subtle yet significant ways. First, there was the care package that appeared at her apartment door. Organic products, fresh fruits, quality meats, all packaged, with the care of a premium store. There was no card or identification, just the food she so desperately needed. "Ms. Johnson," said Mr. Johnson, the doorman of the building, an elderly man with a grey mustache and a paternal demeanour. "A delivery has arrived for you. The delivery person said it was a gift." Then came the medical vouchers. They arrived in the mail in unmarked envelopes, covering appointments at a private clinic on the Upper East Side, known for its excellent obstetric care. When Sarah called to schedule the first appointment, during the appointment, the receptionist informed that, an anonymous benefactor had prepaid a complete package for prenatal care. David was following everything through the reports of Jonas Roberts, the private investigator he had hired. Jonas was a 45-year-old former cop, short and stocky, with keen eyes that missed no detail. His reports were meticulous and revealing. Sarah Johnson, 28 years old, originally from Springfield, lost her parents in a car accident at 17, moved to New York without family or contacts, worked as a waitress, sales clerk, cleaner, always honest jobs, never got involved with drugs or illegal activities. She is beloved by her neighbors, always, helps those in need, even with little. David read each report as if it were a novel, absorbing every detail of Sarah's life. He discovered that she visited the local public library on Saturdays, that she shopped at the farmer's market, always looking for the lowest prices, and that she had returned to night school to finish her high school diploma after discovering her pregnancy. "She's different, you know," commented Margaret, Sarah's octogenarian neighbor, to anyone who would listen. "More at ease. She doesn't stay up late worrying about bills anymore. Must be the pregnancy." What Margaret didn't know was that Sarah was staying up at night for different reasons now. It wasn't the bills that kept her awake, but rather her growing curiosity about her mysterious benefactor. She had tried to find out who it was in every possible way, investigating the number she had called that morning, which went straight to a voicemail, questioning the delivery people who always received products from third parties, even looking for security cameras in the building. "There's something strange about all this," she murmured to herself one night, caressing her belly as she felt the babies move. "No one helps like this out of nowhere, expecting nothing in return." Her natural suspicion, forged by years of disappointments and abandonment, constantly battled against the deep gratitude she felt. Sarah had learned early on that everything in life had a price, and unconditional generosity was a concept that challenged her most basic beliefs about human nature. During an appointment at the Upper East Side Clinic, Sarah met Dr. Patricia Smith, a 40-year-old obstetrician with blonde hair tied in an elegant bun and a genuine smile that immediately put her at ease. "Your babies are perfect, Sarah. Normal development for 26 weeks. You're eating, well, resting properly." The doctor paused, consulting the chart. "I must say it's unusual to see such comprehensive prenatal care fully paid for by an anonymous third party. Do you know anything about who is paying?" "Only that the person made it clear that you should receive the best possible care, and that if there are any complications, we should immediately contact a specific number." Dr. Patricia smiled. "Whoever it is, they care a lot about you and the babies." Meanwhile, David was facing his own inner demons. Each report about Sarah awakened in him a protective instinct he hadn't felt since Helena's death. But there was something more, an emotional connection that grew with every detail discovered about the strength and dignity of that woman. "Mr. Thompson," said Claudio during a morning meeting, "the investigator reported that Miss Johnson is trying to find out the identity of the benefactor. She asked several questions at the clinic and the bank." David laughed, surprising his assistant. "Of course she's investigating. A smart woman doesn't accept charity blindly. That just confirms what I already knew about her. And what if she finds out? Then we'll deal with it when it happens." David stood up, walking to the shelf where he kept a photo of Helena. "Claudio, I want you to organize something special for Mother's Day, a complete dinner delivered to her apartment, with flowers and a card." "What should I write in the card, sir?" David thought for a moment, imagining Sarah's face upon receiving the surprise. "Write, 'To a brave future mother. May your children grow up knowing how loved they are.'" That night, Sarah was preparing dinner, a simple spaghetti with marinara sauce, but made with fresh, quality ingredients she could now afford, when her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Sarah, it's me, David, the man you called that morning." Sarah nearly dropped the pot. She hadn't expected to hear that deep, controlled voice that had saved her life. Hi, I didn't expect," she stammered, feeling her heart race. "I wanted to know how you are, if you need anything." The simple question carried so much genuine care that Sarah had to sit down. "I'm fine. Better than I've been in a long time, actually, and I know I'm the one who should be thanking you for that. You owe nothing to anyone, Sarah. Just take good care of yourself." They talked for 20 minutes about the pregnancy, about New York, about little things in daily life. When they hung up, both felt that something had changed between them. A connection that had begun in desperation was transforming into something much deeper and more complex. Sarah looked at the ultrasound photo of the twins stuck to the fridge and smiled. For the first time in months, the future didn't seem frightening. The month of May brought with it a more colourful New York, with blooming trees and the milder weather preceding winter. Sarah walked through Brooklyn with more confident steps, her 7-month belly comfortably fitted in a navy blue maternity dress she had bought at a department store, the first new dress she had in years. The aroma of roasted coffee from the bakery mixed with the fragrance of the flowers that adorned the streets of the bohemian neighborhood. David's calls had become a constant in her life. Always at 9 o'clock, punctually, the phone would ring. Conversations that had started as wellness checks evolved into discussions about books, music, dreams, and fears. Sarah discovered that Raphael had a passion for Brazilian literature and a surprising vulnerability when he spoke about the loss of his wife. "Have you ever been to the summer festival in Brooklyn?" asked Sarah during one of those calls, gently rubbing her belly where the babies were moving intensely. "Summer festival? No, I've never been to neighborhood festivals," replied David, surprised by the question. He was in his 300-square-foot apartment, wearing reading glasses while reviewing contracts, but the conversation with Sarah always made him stop everything. "It's a tradition here in the neighborhood. They hold it in the park, with hot cider and corn pudding, square dance. It's simple but beautiful. You should come someday." David laughed, imagining himself at a local festival. "I don't know if I would fit in very well." "Why not? Don't you have 2 arms and 2 legs like everyone else?" The simplicity of Sarah's response completely disarmed him. "It's more complicated than that. Or maybe you complicate things too much." That night, after hanging up the phone, David made an impulsive decision. For years, he had anonymously sponsored community events in various neighborhoods in New York through his foundation, including the Summer Festival in Brooklyn. But he had never personally attended any of them. The following Saturday, Central Park was transformed. Colorful banners decorated the trees, booths sold typical foods, and the sound of square dance music echoed through the speakers. Sarah had arrived early, wearing a dress patterned with small flowers and comfortable flat sandals. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun, and she carried a small, handmade bag. David arrived at 8 in the evening, dressed in dark jeans, a white shirt, and a baseball cap pulled down over his eyes. He had chosen the most casual outfit he owned, but still felt completely out of place. Jonas, the investigator he had hired, had provided a recent photo of Sarah, but seeing her in person was like a punch to the gut. She was more beautiful than he had imagined. There was a glow in her face that the photos did not capture, a genuine joy as she chatted with an elderly lady at a candy booth. The pronounced belly of her pregnancy made her look even more radiant, and David felt a pang in his chest as he imagined how Emily would have looked pregnant. "Mr. Johnson, you really outdid yourself with the corn pudding this year," Sarah praised the vendor, an elderly black man with white hair and a wide smile. "Oh, Sarah, how are the little ones?" Mr. Johnson pointed to her belly with paternal affection. "Have you chosen their names yet?" "I haven't decided yet. I want names that mean strength, you know? They will need to be strong in this life." David approached the booth, pretending to be interested in the typical foods. He was nervous in a way he hadn't felt since his teenage years, afraid of being recognized, but at the same time desperate to be near her. "Good evening. Could you serve me some hot cider?" he asked, keeping his voice lower than usual. Mr. Johnson served him in a clay mug, and David positioned himself close enough to hear Sarah talking to others. He discovered that she knew practically all the residents of the neighborhood, always offered to help those in need, and had a well-formed opinion about everything, but expressed her ideas with respect and intelligence. "Sarah, did you see?" "There's a very elegant man over at Mr. Johnson's booth," whispered Mrs. Smith, a curious neighbor. "He's definitely not from the neighborhood." Sarah followed her friend's gaze and saw David. Even in a cap and casual clothes, there was something in his posture that denoted class and power. He held the mug of hot cider as if it were the first time he had seen one, but his gestures were naturally refined. "He must be some lost tourist," Sarah replied, but continued to observe the stranger with curiosity. David noticed her gaze and felt his heart race. For a moment, their eyes met, and he saw the sharp intelligence that Jonas had described in the reports. Sarah had the ability to see through people, to pick up on details that others ignored. "Excuse me," said Sarah, approaching David with the ease of someone who had nothing to lose. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No, I was passing by and saw the festival. It looked interesting." David struggled to keep his voice casual, but Sarah had already noticed that he spoke with more formal politeness than most people in the neighborhood. "First time at a summer festival. Is it that obvious?" Sarah smiled, and David felt as if the world had stopped. "You're holding the hot cider like it's champagne, and your hands," she observed quickly, "have never done hard work." The observation was made without judgment, just with the natural curiosity of someone used to reading people to survive. David looked at his own hands, manicured, callus-free, protected by a lifetime of privilege. "You're very observant." "I have to be. A pregnant woman alone learns to identify people quickly." Sarah unconsciously rubbed her belly. "But you seem harmless. A bit lost, but harmless." David laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised them both. "Thank you, I think." "Sarah," she introduced herself, extending her hand. "Robert," David lied, shaking her hand. The touch was electric, and they both felt an immediate connection that left them uncomfortable. They spent the next hour talking. David discovered that Sarah was even more impressive in person, intelligent, funny, determined. But with a vulnerability she tried to hide behind humor and fierce independence. Sarah, in turn, was intrigued by Robert, a clearly educated and prosperous man, but who showed genuine interest in her story without any condescension. "Do you have children, Robert?" Sarah asked while they watched children dancing the square dance. "No. My wife and she passed away before we could start a family." The pain in his voice was real and deep. "I'm sorry." Sarah lightly touched his arm. "That must be very difficult." "And you? The father of the babies. Disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. He said he wasn't ready to be a father." The bitterness in her voice was masked by an attempt. Sarah wanted to say that she wasn't alone, that someone was taking care of her, that he would do anything to ensure that she and the babies had everything they needed. But all he could do was watch as she struggled to maintain her composure. "I'm sure you'll be fine. You seem like a very strong woman." "I have no choice," Sarah replied with brutal honesty. "Strength is not a luxury I can afford." As the party began to disperse around 11 at night, David knew he needed to leave before his facade was discovered, but he couldn't pull away from Sarah. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Sarah. Maybe we'll see each other again." "Maybe. You know where to find me. I'm always around." David walked away but stopped after a few meters and turned back. Sarah was still standing in the same spot, one hand on her lower back, the other cradling her belly. There was something deeply touching about the image. A pregnant woman, alone in a square that was emptying, yet with unwavering dignity. That night, neither of them slept well. Sarah kept thinking about the polite stranger who had appeared at the party, with his sad eyes and soft hands. David replayed every moment of their conversation, every expression on Sarah's face, every time she had protectively touched her belly. The next morning, David called Jonas. "I need you to find out everything about last night's party. Who organized it, who funded it, how she learned the details. Is there a problem, Mr. Thompson? I just need to understand a few things." David paused, processing the complexity of the situation he had created. "And Jonas, from now on, keep a greater distance. I don't want her to feel watched." What David didn't know was that Sarah had spent the night researching. A smart and suspicious woman, she had noticed details at the party that didn't add up. The impeccable organization, the exceptional quality of the food, the number of discreet security personnel scattered throughout the square, everything indicated a powerful sponsor. And there was something about Robert that bothered her. Not in a negative way, but rather a disconcerting familiarity, as if she had known him from somewhere. His voice, especially. Throughout their conversation, Sarah had the feeling that she had heard that voice before, in very specific circumstances. That Sunday morning, while preparing tea and feeling the babies kick vigorously, Sarah made a decision. She was going to find out who was behind her sudden change of fortune and who the mysterious Robert really was, who had appeared at the party with sad eyes and well-intentioned lies. The hunt had begun, and Sarah Johnson never gave up on anything she considered important. Monday arrived grey and cold, typical of the autumn in New York that was setting in. Sarah woke up determined, with a plan formed during her sleepless night. There was something in Robert's voice that haunted her, a disturbing familiarity she couldn't identify. She wore a dark green wool sweater that accentuated her eyes and a pair of maternity jeans, grabbed her small bag, and headed to downtown Brooklyn. Her first stop was at Mr. Johnson's bakery, where she knew neighborhood gossip circulated faster than morning coffee. The establishment was small and cozy, with tiled walls and the irresistible aroma of freshly baked French bread. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," Sarah greeted, leaning on the glass counter where homemade sweets were displayed. "Sarah, my dear, how are the little ones today?" The baker, a 60-year-old Portuguese man with a thick moustache and a prominent belly, always treated Sarah as if she were his own daughter, restless since early morning. "Mr. Johnson, did you see that man at the party last night? Tall, elegant, wearing a cap?" "Ah, the outsider." The baker's eyes sparkled with interest. "Mrs. Smith said he bought hot cider for several children. Very polite, but a bit lost, poor thing." Sarah bought a sweetbread and moved on to her next stop, the corner newsstand run by Mr. Nelson, a thin and observant man who knew every person who passed through the neighborhood. "Mr. Nelson, that man from the party yesterday, do you know if he's from around here?" "No, Sarah, but it's interesting that you ask." Mr. Nelson leaned in conspiratorially. "After you left, I saw him talking on the phone. He was saying something about checking if everything went well and upcoming events." It sounded like organizer talk, you know. Sarah's suspicions intensified. No event organizer showed up alone at a community party at 9 at night, dressed casually and pretending to be a lost tourist. While Sarah investigated, David was in his office, trying to focus on a meeting with Japanese investors, but his mind kept drifting back to the previous night. The connection he felt with Sarah had been intense and confusing. How could he feel so close to someone he had officially just met? "Mr. Thompson," Claudio's voice brought him back to the present. "The representatives from the Yamamoto Corporation are waiting for your response about the project in San Francisco." David blinked, realizing he had completely lost track of the conversation. "I apologize, gentlemen. Where were we?" During the meeting break, David walked to the panoramic window, watching the city's movement below. His phone rang. It was Jonas. "Mr. Thompson, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Miss Johnson is asking questions about the man she spoke with at the party. She suspects he wasn't an ordinary tourist. Jonas's voice was tense. "It's only a matter of time before she discovers the anonymous sponsorship of the party." David closed his eyes. Sarah was smarter and more determined than he had imagined. "Keep monitoring, but maintain distance. And Jonas, if she discovers anything, let me know immediately." Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Sarah decided to go straight to the source. She picked up the phone and dialed the number that had changed her life 2 months ago. Before, the same number that Robert might have been using. The phone rang 3 times before David answered, immediately recognizing Sarah's number. "Hello." Sarah's heart raced. It was the same voice, exactly the same voice as Robert from the party, just without the effort to disguise the polite tone. "It's me, Sarah. We need to talk." David felt the world spin. "Sarah, I can explain. You're him, aren't you? The man who helped me, who has been depositing money, who paid for my medical appointments." Her voice was controlled, but David could feel the underlying tension. "You lied to me yesterday." "Yes, I lied, but not about what matters." "And what matters, David? Is David really your name, or is that a lie too?" "It is David, yes, David Thompson." He took a deep breath, preparing for the consequences of his decision. "Can we meet? I need to explain in person." "Coffee at the bakery. In an hour." Sarah hung up without waiting for a response. David cancelled all his meetings for the day and asked the driver to prepare the car. During the drive to Brooklyn, he mentally rehearsed how he would explain his actions without sounding like a wealthy stalker with a savior complex. When he arrived at the bakery, Sarah was already there, sitting at a small table in the corner with a cup of chamomile tea in front of her. There was a steely determination in her gaze that made David hesitate for a moment before approaching. "Sarah, sit down." Her tone was sharp, but not hostile. "First, I want to know why you lied yesterday." David sat down, his expensive clothes contrasting with the bakery's simple environment. "Because I wanted to get to know you as a person, not as a charity project." "Charity project?" Sarah's eyes glinted dangerously. "Is that how you see me?" "No, that's not it." David ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "Sarah, when you called that night, something in me awakened. A need to help, yes, but also a connection." "A connection," Sarah repeated the words with irony. "You investigated my life, didn't you? You know where I live, where I shop, which doctor I see." David did not deny it, and his silence was confirmation enough. "Why? Why would a rich and powerful man be interested in a pregnant cleaner? What's your game?" "There's no game." David leaned forward, his intense brown eyes locked on hers. "My wife died 3 years ago. Since then, my life has been work and more work. When you called, it was as if something dormant in me came back to life." Sarah studied his face, searching for signs of deceit. "And yesterday, why did you show up at the party pretending to be someone else?" "Because you mentioned the party, and I wanted to see you happy, in your element. But I knew that if I showed up as David Thompson, CEO of Thompson Holdings, you would treat me differently." "And how should I treat you now?" Sarah unconsciously caressed her belly, a gesture David had learned to recognize as a sign that she was processing complex information. "As the person I really am, not the businessman, not the rich man, just David." Sarah fell silent for a long moment, observing the bakery's activity around them. Mr. Johnson pretended to organize the bread, but was clearly trying to eavesdrop on the conversation. "David, do you have any idea what it's like to live always waiting for the other shoe to drop, to wake up every day knowing that everything could fall apart at any moment?" Her voice was lower now, laden with a vulnerability she rarely showed. "When good things happen in my life, I always look for the hidden cost. And what would the cost be in this case? I don't know yet. But men like you don't do anything without expecting something in return. David felt as if he had been slapped. Men like me? Rich, powerful, used to buying what they want. Sarah looked directly at him. What do you want from me, David? The question sliced through the air like a blade. David realized this was the moment of truth. He could lie again, create a story about pure altruism, or admit the complexity of his feelings. Honestly, at first I just wanted to help, but then I started to care about you, about the babies, about your happiness. He paused, struggling with his own emotions. Talking to you every night became the best part of my day. And now that I know who you are, now I hope you give me a chance to prove that my feelings are genuine. Sarah slowly stood up, leaning on the table. I need time to process all of this. How much time? I don't know. Maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door, but stopped and turned around. David? Yes, thank you for everything. Thank you for, even if I don't fully understand your motives, you saved my life and my children's. David sat in the bakery for another 20 minutes after Sarah left, processing the conversation and trying to understand what he felt. There was something about Sarah Johnson that challenged all his previous experiences with relationships. She wasn't impressed by his money or status. In fact, she seemed suspicious of those things. That night, for the first time in 2 months, Sarah's phone did not ring at 9 o'clock. She stayed awake late, staring at the silent device and questioning whether she felt relief or disappointment. On the other side of the city, David was also awake, resisting the urge to call. He had laid all his cards on the table, and now he needed to wait to see if Sarah would decide he was worth the risk. The fundamental change had occurred. They were no longer strangers connected by a misguided bond. Now they were two real people with complex stories and genuine emotions, trying to figure out if they could build something true together. The game of masks had ended. The real game was just beginning. A week passed in tense silence. Sarah maintained her routine, medical appointments, walks around the neighborhood, reading in the public library, but something had fundamentally changed in her perspective. Learning the true identity of David brought an emotional complexity that she was not prepared to face. The small apartment in Brooklyn, which had once been her refuge, now felt claustrophobic under the weight of her reflections. On a rainy Thursday in June, Sarah was organizing the baby clothes she had started to buy, tiny pieces in neutral tones, carefully washed and folded, when the intercom buzzed. Sarah? There's a girl down. Here, who wants to talk to you? She says it's urgent, Mr. Johnson, the doorman informed her. What girl? She didn't want to give her name, but it's raining and she seems quite distressed. Sarah went downstairs, intrigued. In the building's entrance hall, she found a teenage girl of about 15, soaked from the rain, with dark brown hair clinging to her face and strikingly familiar green eyes. The girl wore the uniform of an expensive private school, a plaid skirt, white blouse and navy blue blazer, but she looked completely disheveled. Are you Sarah Johnson? The girl asked with a trembling voice. I am. And you are? I am. My name is Isabella Thompson. The revelation hit like a bombshell. I'm David's daughter. Sarah felt her legs weaken. David had never mentioned a daughter. Come in, you're soaked. Inside the apartment, Sarah offered a towel and hot tea to Isabella, who sat on the couch hugging her knees. Up close, the resemblance to David was undeniable. The same intense brown eyes, the same determination in her chin, but there was a teenage fragility that contrasted with the strength Sarah knew from her father. How did you find me? Sarah asked, pouring the tea into simple ceramic mugs. I heard my dad talking to his assistant about you. He doesn't know, but sometimes I listen to his calls. Isabella took a sip of the tea, her hands still trembling. He calls you every night for months. Used to, Sarah corrected. We haven't talked in a week. That's why I came. Isabella looked directly at Sarah, and the intensity of her gaze was unsettling in someone so young. I need to know what kind of person you are. Why? Because my dad has changed since he started talking to you, and I need help from someone who understands what it means to need someone. Sarah sat in the armchair across from the couch, studying the desperate expression of the teenager. What happened, Isabella? I'm pregnant. The words fell into the silence of the apartment like stones in still water. Sarah felt an immediate connection to the girl's despair. She had been in that situation herself, though older. How many months? 3. Isabella began to cry. And I don't know what to do. I can't tell my dad. He'll freak out. I can't tell my grandma. She'll kick me out. And the boy, the father of the baby, had said it's not his problem. Sarah got up and sat next to Isabella, wrapping her arm around the girl's shoulders. Why did you come to me? You don't even know me. Because I heard my dad talking about you, about how strong you are, how you're facing your pregnancy alone. I thought maybe you could give me some advice, tell me what to do. Sarah took a deep breath, processing the irony of the situation. David's daughter, whom she didn't even know existed, was asking for advice about an unplanned pregnancy, exactly the same situation that had brought Sarah and David together. Isabella, how old are you? 15. I'll turn 16 in August. And your parents? Where's your mother? My mum died when I was 5. Not the mum my dad lost 3 years ago. That was Emily, my stepmother. My real mum's name was Carla. Isabella wiped her tears with the back of her hand. My dad had an affair with her when he was younger. When she died, he brought me home. But we never really got close. Sarah began to understand the complexity of David's family situation. He had raised a daughter from a previous relationship while married to Emily, dealing with his own unresolved issues about fatherhood and loss. And your grandma? Do you live with her? Yes, Carla's mother. She raised me when my dad thought he couldn't take care of a small child. She's a good person, but very strict, traditional Catholic. If she finds out I'm pregnant, she'll support you, Sarah said with conviction, because that's what grandmothers do. How can you be sure? Sarah smiled sadly. Because I've been through it too. Not at your age. But I have. And I learned that the people who truly love us find a way to accept us, even when we make choices they don't approve of. Isabella looked at Sarah's belly. Are you having twins? Yes, 2 boys. And their father? Disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy, just like the father of your baby. Isabella fell silent for a moment, processing the information. How do you not hate all men? The question elicited an involuntary laugh from Sarah. Sometimes I do hate them, yes, but then I remember that generalizing has never helped anyone. Your dad, for example, he showed me that there are good men in the world, even with all the complications, especially because of the complications. Good men don't run away when things get tough. Isabella curled up on the couch. So what do I do? Sarah thought carefully before responding. First, you need to talk to your dad. He has the right to know, and you have the right to his support. What if he gets furious? He will be, but not with you, with the situation. And after the initial anger, he will do everything to help you. Sarah gently touched Isabella's arm. Can I tell you something about your dad? He has a huge heart. Maybe he's not very good at... David had changed his suit for casual clothes, dark jeans and a light blue shirt, in an attempt to appear less intimidating. Isabella held his hand, something she hadn't done since childhood. Sarah welcomed them with fresh coffee and sweet bread from the bakery. The apartment was impeccably organized, but David noticed details that Jonas's reports hadn't captured. The lovingly tended plants on the windowsill, the books stacked beside the sofa, the ultrasound photo of the babies stuck to the refrigerator. "How are you feeling today, Isabella?" Sarah asked, serving coffee in mismatched but charming mugs. "Better. I talked to my dad." Isabella looked at David. "He didn't kick me out." "I would never do that," David said firmly. "You are my daughter, no matter what happens." Sarah observed the interaction between father and daughter, noting how both were trying to connect despite years of emotional distance. "David, can I ask you something?" Sarah settled into the armchair, her hands resting on her belly. "Why did you never tell me about Isabella?" David sighed deeply. "Because I failed as a father. After Carla died, I didn't know how to care for a 5-year-old. I let my mother-in-law raise her and convinced myself I was doing the best for everyone." "And when you married Emily?" "Emily tried to get close to Bella, but I was so focused on keeping my life compartmentalized that I never allowed them to develop a true relationship." David looked at his daughter with remorse. "When Emily died, I realized how much I had lost. Not just a wife, but the chance to have a united family." Isabella touched her father's arm. "Dad, I never blamed you for leaving me with Grandma Smith. She loved me and took care of me, but I always felt like you saw me as a painful reminder of Mom Carla." "It was never that, Bella. You remind me of how strong and determined your mother was, and you remind me that love can happen in the most unexpected moments." Sarah watched the conversation with tears in her eyes. There was something deeply touching about seeing father and daughter finally connecting through their shared vulnerabilities. "And now," Sarah asked, "what's the plan?" David and Isabella exchanged glances. "We want your opinion," Isabella said. "You've been through this. You know what it's like to be pregnant and scared." Sarah took a deep breath. "First, Isabella needs proper medical care. Second, you both need to talk to your grandmother. And third," she hesitated, looking at David, "you need to decide if you want me to continue being a part of your lives." "Why wouldn't we want that?" Isabella asked, confused. "Because the situation has become complicated. I have feelings for your father, but I don't know if they are real or just gratitude. He has feelings for me, but maybe it's just a savior complex. And now you are pregnant, needing emotional support." Sarah paused. "It's a lot of emotional responsibility to place on a relationship that is still defining itself." David leaned forward. "Sarah, you saved my relationship with my daughter yesterday. Isabella came to you because she knew instinctively that you would understand. This isn't a coincidence." "And from there?" "From there, perhaps fate brought us together for a reason greater than any of us can imagine." David looked alternately at Sarah and Isabella. "Maybe the three of us are exactly where we need to be." Isabella smiled. "Like a crazy, dysfunctional family." Sarah laughed, the first genuine laugh she had had in days. "Very crazy, but family nonetheless," David added. In that moment, something changed between them. It was no longer about David helping Sarah, or Sarah advising Isabella, or Isabella reconnecting with David. It was about three people who had found each other in extraordinary circumstances and discovered that together they could face any storm. "So," Sarah said, raising her coffee mug, "to the most unlikely family in New York." "To new beginnings," David added. "To not doing everything alone," Isabella concluded. As they toasted with mugs of coffee and tea, none of them could imagine that in a few weeks their lives would be turned upside down again. But this time, at least, they wouldn't be facing the storms alone. The family was beginning to form, imperfect and complicated, but real and strong enough to withstand whatever came next. The second half of June brought the typical intense cold of New York winters. Sarah was 8 months pregnant, and the twins seemed increasingly eager to meet the world, kicking vigorously during her morning walks through Brooklyn. That Tuesday, she had gone out to buy ingredients for the special dinner she would prepare. David and Isabella were coming over for dinner at her apartment, a tradition they had established in recent weeks. The revelation about Isabella had changed the entire dynamic of the relationship between Sarah and David. The presence of the pregnant teenager had created a familial intimacy that forced both to set aside doubts about their feelings. They were no longer just a rich man and a poor woman, trying to figure out if they had anything in common. They were two people creating an unconventional family, united by extraordinary circumstances and genuine feelings. Sarah was choosing tomatoes at the farmer's market in Central Park when her cell phone rang. It was Charles, David's assistant. "Miss Sarah, this is Charles Ferreira, Mr. Thompson's assistant. I need to speak with you urgently." "Is David okay?" Sarah felt her heart race. "Yes, ma'am. But we have a delicate situation. The press has found out about your relationship. There are journalists at the entrance of your building." Sarah looked around the market, noticing for the first time a man in sunglasses who seemed to be discreetly photographing her with his cell phone. Another man, closer, was speaking quietly on the phone while watching her. "What does this mean?" "It means your privacy has been compromised. Mr. Thompson is on his way to pick you up. Please go to a public and busy location until he arrives." Sarah headed to the bakery, which she lived 2 blocks from the market. During the walk, she noticed that at least 2 people were following her. Her heart raced, and the babies reacted to her stress with more intense movements. "Mr. Johnson," she said upon entering the bakery, "can I stay here for a few minutes? I'm feeling unwell." The baker, always protective, immediately led her to the back of the shop. "Of course, my dear. Sit here. I'll make some tea." 5 minutes later, David arrived, accompanied by 2 security guards. His expression was tense, and he immediately hugged her upon seeing her. "Are you okay? Are the babies okay?" "I'm scared. What's happening?" David sighed deeply. "Someone leaked information about us to the press. There's an article coming out now online. Millionaire from New York maintains secret relationship with pregnant cleaner." "How did they find out?" "I'm still trying to figure that out. But, Sarah, this is going to get ugly. They're going to try to turn our story into a cheap soap opera." They exited through the back door of the bakery, avoiding the journalists who had positioned themselves at the main entrance. On the way to David's apartment, Sarah read the article on the tablet he had brought. The words hit her like punches. Close sources reveal that businessman David Thompson, known for his million-dollar investments and discreet social life, has been in a relationship for months with a young pregnant cleaner he met under mysterious circumstances. The social and economic disparity between the two raises questions about the true motivations of the relationship. "They're insinuating that you're buying me," Sarah said, feeling nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. "They're trying to create a scandal where none exists." David took her hand. "Sarah, this doesn't change anything between us." "Doesn't change? David, they're going to destroy your reputation, your business, your social standing. And you think I care about that more than I care about you?" Before Sarah could respond, David's phone rang. It was Isabella in a panic. "Dad, there are journalists at school. They're asking about you. And Sarah, about me, about Grandma Smith." "Where are you now?" "Hiding in the second-floor bathroom. Dad, they know about my pregnancy." David closed his eyes, feeling his world crumble. "Bella, I'm coming to get you. Don't talk to anyone." When they hung up, Sarah was pale. "They found out about Isabella too?" "Apparently, yes." David instructed the driver to head to Isabella's school. "Someone close to us leaked very specific information." "Who would do that?" David was beginning to form an unpleasant suspicion. "Someone who has access to intimate details about my life and my business." At the school, They managed to rescue Isabella through the emergency exit. The teenager was in shock, her eyes red from crying. "Dad, everyone at school knows I'm pregnant now. The principal called me into her office, and my classmates were staring at me. It's horrible." Sarah hugged Isabella in the back seat of the car. "It will pass, dear. Scandals always pass." "What if it doesn't pass? What if my life turns into a circus?" David looked at the two most important women in his life, both suffering because of his public exposure, and made a decision. "Let's go to my house. You'll be safe there while I sort this out." David's apartment in the Upper East Side had strict security, but they could still see from the windows some journalists positioning themselves on the sidewalk outside the building. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, curious acquaintances, and even some investors worried about the company's image. "David," Sarah said, watching the commotion below, "I should leave. Disappear for a while until this cools down." "No." The response was immediate and firm. "I'm not going to let them separate us because of malicious gossip." "But this will affect your business, your daughter." "Sarah!" David moved closer to her, taking her hands. "I lost Emily in an accident I couldn't control. I spent 3 years living like a ghost, just fulfilling obligations. When you came into my life, I started to feel like it was worth being alive again." "David!" "I'm not finished. Isabella was drifting away from me, building walls that I didn't know how to break down. It was through you that we managed to reconnect." He looked at his daughter, who was watching them from the armchair. "You both gave me back the ability to love and be loved. I'm not going to give that up because of a few sensationalist journalists." Isabella stood up and joined them. "Sarah, you can't leave now. We're a family. Families face storms together." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. I'm just a pregnant cleaner. You are—" "You are what?" David interrupted. "Imperfect human beings trying to do the best we can? People who love each other despite difficult circumstances?" "Normal people," Isabella added. "Money doesn't make anyone better or worse, Sarah. You taught me that." At that moment, the intercom rang. It was Charles. "Mr. Thompson, I found out who leaked the information. It was your brother, Charles." David felt his blood run cold. Charles Thompson, 3 years younger, had always envied his brother's success. He worked at the company as vice president, but had never accepted being second in the family hierarchy. "How did you find out?" "He was seen having lunch with Roger Smith from Gossip Weekly last week, and our investigation showed that he accessed confidential files about your personal investments." David turned off the intercom and faced Sarah and Isabella. "It was my brother." "Why?" Sarah asked, shocked. "Because he always wanted to see me fail, and he probably thought a love scandal would be the perfect way to destroy my reputation." Isabella was furious. "Uncle Charles did this. He knows about my pregnancy too." "Apparently, yes." David paced back and forth, processing the family betrayal. He must have thought that 2 problematic pregnancies in the family would be enough to get me out of control of the company. Sarah sat heavily on the sofa, one hand on her aching lower back. "So he used our happiness as a weapon. Against you." "And now?" asked Isabella. David stopped walking and looked at the two of them. "Now we fight together. We'll show him and anyone who doubts that our family is real, it's strong, and it's more important than any scandal they try to create." "How?" "By giving interviews, telling our version of the story, showing that true love knows no social class." David knelt before Sarah. "But only if you want to, Sarah. Only if you're sure you want to face this with me." Sarah looked at David, then at Isabella, who was watching her with hope in her eyes. Outside, the media storm continued, but inside that 300-square-foot apartment, there was something stronger than any scandal, There was family, there was love, there was the determination to protect what truly mattered. "I'm scared," admitted Sarah. "So are we," said Isabella, taking her hand. "But we'll face it together," David added. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the babies move, as if approving the decision she was about to make. "Then let's go to war." Wednesday morning dawned grey, with a light drizzle that seemed to mirror the tense mood hanging over New York. David had spent the night organizing a communication strategy with his legal and public relations team, while Sarah and Isabella remained in the apartment, supporting each other as they watched the developments of the media coverage. The conference room on the 35th floor of the Thompson Holdings building was packed. Besides David, there was Dr. Patricia Smith, one of the most respected communication lawyers in New York, a 50-year-old woman with impeccably styled grey hair and red-framed glasses that conveyed authority, and Lucas Martin, a crisis management specialist, a young man of 35 with contagious energy and a reputation for turning seemingly impossible situations around. "The situation is delicate but not irreversible," Lucas began, consulting his tablet. "We have 3 fronts to combat: legal, media, and business." "Start with the legal," David requested, serving coffee to everyone in an attempt to maintain normalcy. Dr. Patricia opened a thick folder. "We can sue the newspaper for invasion of privacy and defamation, especially regarding the insinuations about the motivations behind the relationship. As for your brother, we have enough evidence for a lawsuit for breach of confidentiality and emotional damages." "And the media front?" "I suggest an exclusive interview with a highly credible outlet," Lucas said. "You 3 together, telling the real story. Humanize the situation, show that you are a real family facing real challenges." David thought for a moment. "And the business front?" "That's our biggest challenge," Dr. Patricia admitted. "Some investors are worried about the company's image. There are rumors that the board may call an extraordinary meeting." "Let them call it," David said determinedly. "I'd rather face this head-on." Meanwhile, in the apartment, Sarah and Isabella were having their own strategic meeting. The teenager had skipped school. Impossible to face curious classmates and embarrassed teachers, and the 2 spent their time discussing motherhood, relationships, and how to deal with external pressure. "Sarah," Isabella said absent-mindedly, stirring a plate of fruit, "do you regret meeting my dad?" "Why do you ask that?" "Because your life was simple before. Hard, but simple. Now it's turning into a circus." Sarah pondered the question while watching the city's movement through the panoramic window. "You know, Bella, I spent my whole life avoiding complications. I worked, paid my bills, kept my distance from situations that could hurt me. And now I realize that a life without risks is a life without growth." Sarah turned to the teenager. "Meeting your dad forced me to trust again, to accept help, to believe that I deserve love. That's not simple, but it's real." Isabella smiled. "You love him." "I do. And I love you too, as if you were my daughter, even being a pregnant and problematic teenager. Especially because of that. Because you remind me that it's possible to be strong and vulnerable at the same time." Their reflections were interrupted by the intercom. It was the doorman informing them that there was an elderly lady insisting on coming up to speak with Isabella. "It must be Grandma Smith," Isabella said, paling. "She must have seen the news." 10. Minutes later, Grandma Smith entered the apartment like a whirlwind. At 70, she maintained an upright posture and a piercing gaze that had intimidated generations of disobedient grandchildren. She wore a simple navy blue dress, black flats, and carried a leather bag that seemed to have seen decades of stories. "Isabella Maria Thompson," she said in a firm voice, but Sarah noticed that there was more concern than anger in her tone. "Come here immediately." Isabella stood up timidly, but to everyone's surprise, her grandmother enveloped her in a tight hug. "My girl, why didn't you tell me about the baby?" "Grandma, I was scared of your reaction." "Scared? Child, I raised 5 kids on my own after your grandfather died. Do you think a pregnancy would scare me?" Grandma Smith pulled Isabella away to look her in the eyes. "I'm disappointed because you didn't trust me, not because of the baby." Sarah watched the scene with tears in her eyes, painfully reminded of her own grandmother she had lost years ago. "And you," Grandma Smith turned to Sarah, "must be the young lady my grandson is dating." "Yes, ma'am, I'm Sarah Johnson." Grandma studied her from head to toe, an evaluation that lasted long and uncomfortable seconds. "How many months?" "8 months. Twins." "And the dad?" "He disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy." Grandma nodded as if that confirmed something she already suspected. Weak men always run away when responsibility comes. She sat down in the main armchair as if it were her home. "Tell me about my son-in-law." Sarah nearly choked. "Son-in-law? Don't play dumb. You're living here, aren't you? Taking care of Isabella as if she were family. That makes you part of the family, whether you like it or not." For the next 2 hours, Sarah told her story to Grandma Smith, from the desperate phone call to the discovery of David's true identity, the development of his feelings, and the unlikely formation of his unconventional family. Mrs. Smith listened in silence, asking pointed questions that revealed a sharp intelligence and a deep understanding of human nature. "And do you believe he truly loves her?" she finally asked. "I do," Sarah replied. "Why?" Mrs. Smith pondered the question. "Because he could have any woman, wealthy, educated, from high society, but he chose a pregnant cleaner with problems." She touched her belly. "And because, when he looks at me, I see in his eyes the same feeling I feel in my heart." Mrs. Smith turned to Isabella. "And you? What do you think of them together?" "I think they complete each other. Dad has become more human, more present. Sarah has become more confident, happier." Isabella paused. "And I gained a second mom." Mrs. Smith was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Finally, she stood up and walked to the window, observing the journalists still positioning themselves on the sidewalk. "Well, if you're going to face this storm, you'll need all the help you can get." She turned to the 2 of them. "Consider me officially part of this crazy family." "Grandma, Isabella dear, I learned long ago that family is not defined by blood or money, but by who stands by your side when the world is crumbling." Mrs. Smith smiled for the first time since she arrived. "And from what I see, you're lucky to have each other." When David came home in the late afternoon, he found the 3 women in the kitchen, preparing dinner together. The sound of laughter and animated conversation surprised him. It was not what he expected to find after a day dealing with lawyers and crisis strategies. "Grandma Smith," he exclaimed, kissing his mother-in-law's cheek, "I didn't expect to see you here." "David, my son," Mrs. Smith hugged him warmly, "I came to meet my new granddaughter and see how you're all handling this whole mess." "And what's the verdict?" Mrs. Smith looked at Sarah, who was seasoning a pot of sauce, and then at Isabella, who was chopping vegetables with unusual concentration. "The verdict is that you all make a beautiful family, imperfections and all." She pointed to Sarah's belly. "And that these babies are going to be born into a home full of love, regardless of what the newspapers say." David felt a deep emotion seeing the 4 generations of important women in his life united in the kitchen. There was something profoundly comforting about the scene, a domestic normalcy that completely contrasted with the media chaos outside. "How was the meeting?" Sarah asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "We have a plan. We're going to hold a press conference on Friday, the 3 of us, telling our version of the story. And what if it doesn't work? It will work, Mrs. Smith said with authority, because the truth always wins in the end, and the truth is that you love each other. That night, while watching a movie in the living room, David realized that something fundamental had changed. It was no longer about him protecting Sarah and Isabella. Now it was about all of them protecting each other like a real family. The scandal was far from over, but they were no longer facing it alone. They had each other, they had a plan, and more importantly, they had the certainty that what they felt was real enough to withstand any storm. The war was far from over, but the first battle had been won. They had chosen to stay united. Friday arrived with a crystal blue sky, contrasting with the tension hanging over the TV studio in Brooklyn. David, Sarah, and Isabella had chosen this outlet for the interview due to its journalistic credibility and its avoidance of the sensationalism that characterized other shows. Journalist Carla Johnson, known for her respectful yet direct interviews, would host them on the program Real Conversations. Sarah was visibly nervous, constantly adjusting the navy blue maternity dress that Mrs. Smith had insisted she buy for the occasion. At 8.5 months pregnant, every movement required effort, but her determination to defend her family was unwavering. Isabella beside her wore a white blouse and a black skirt, looking older than her 15 years, but with a maturity forced by circumstances. "Remember," David said as they waited in the makeup room, "let's be honest, but not defensive. Our story speaks for itself." "And what if she asks about the money?" Sarah questioned, watching the technicians move through the mirror. "We tell the truth, that it started as humanitarian aid and evolved into genuine love." David took her hand, noticing how cold it still was from nerves. "Sarah, you owe nothing to anyone. You don't need to justify yourself." Isabella, who had been silent, finally spoke. "And what if they ask about my pregnancy? About how a 15-year-old got involved in all this? You tell your truth," Sarah replied firmly, "that you made a mistake, like any teenager can, but that you are taking responsibility with the support of your family." Half an hour later, they were sitting in the studio before Carla Johnson, a 45-year-old woman with short, brown hair and an intelligent gaze that immediately put them at ease. The set was simple, comfortable armchairs, neutral decor that focused attention on the interviewees. "David, Sarah, Isabella," Carla began once the cameras started rolling. "Thank you for accepting our invitation. I imagine this week has been particularly difficult for you." "It has been challenging," David replied, keeping his voice calm, "but it has also strengthened us as a family." "Sarah, could you tell us how you met David?" Sarah took a deep breath, looking directly at the cameras. "I dialed the wrong number one March morning. I was 6 months pregnant, desperate because I was about to be evicted, and I found a number scribbled on a piece of paper. I thought it belonged to someone important, someone who could lend me money. And on the other end of the line was David. It was. And he listened to me. At the most difficult moment of my life, when I didn't even believe I deserved help, she heard me and decided to help." Carla turned to David. "What went through your mind at that moment?" I recognized the desperation in her voice. My wife, Emily, had died 3 years earlier, and I was empty. Helping Sarah gave me purpose again. David paused, choosing his words carefully. But what started as charity quickly turned into something much deeper. When did you realize you had feelings for each other? Sarah and David exchanged glances, an involuntary smile passing between them. "For me, it was gradual," Sarah said. "David called every night at 9 just to check on me. We talked about books, dreams, fears. I realized I was eagerly anticipating those calls. For me, it was when I met her in person," David admitted. "At a summer festival in Brooklyn. I saw a strong, intelligent, independent woman who wasn't interested in my money or status. She was interested in the person I was. Carla turned to Isabella. Isabella, how do you fit into this story? The teenager took a deep breath, showing impressive maturity. I am David's daughter from a previous relationship. My mum passed away when I was little, and my dad and I struggled to connect. And did that change with Sarah's arrival? Completely. Sarah helped me understand my dad better, and when I found out I was pregnant, Isabella looked at Sarah with gratitude. She was the first person I thought of to ask for advice. Carla leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. Isabella, you are only 15. How are you dealing with a pregnancy at this age? I won't lie, it's scary. But I have a family that supports me, and I learned from Sarah that being a young mum doesn't mean my life is over. It means it's going to take a different path than I planned. Sarah, many people criticized the relationship, insinuating that you took advantage of David's financial situation. How do you respond to that? The question hit Sarah like a punch, but she was expecting it. Carla, I have worked since I was 15. I never asked for anything from anyone before that desperate night. When I found out who David really was, my first reaction was distrust, exactly because I knew that kind of prejudice. And what convinced you that his feelings were genuine? The fact that he risked everything for us. His reputation, his business, his social standing. Men who only want fun don't make that kind of sacrifice. David spoke up. Carla, I want to make something very clear. Sarah could have any man. She is smart, beautiful, strong, determined. If anyone is benefiting from this relationship, it's me. She gave me back the ability to love and to be a family. Carla smiled, clearly touched by the sincerity of the testimony. And what are your plans for the future? The twins are due in a few weeks, Sarah said, rubbing her belly. We want to raise our children together, in a family where love matters more than money. Isabella going to continue her studies? Yes, the teenager replied with determination. I will finish high school, go to college, achieve my dreams, just now with a baby in my arms. And will you have support for that? You will have all the support in the world, David assured. Both Isabella and Sarah will have everything they need to achieve their goals. When the interview ended, 40 minutes later, the three felt exhausted but relieved. They had shared their truth without dramatizations or excessive justifications, simply as a family formed under unusual circumstances, but with genuine love. How do you think it went? Sarah asked as they left the studio. We were ourselves, David replied. That's all we could do. Isabella checked her phone and frowned. Dad, there are messages from school. The principal wants to talk to Grandma Smith about my situation. And what's the problem? Some parents are complaining. They think a pregnant teenager sets a bad example for the other students. David felt anger rising, but Sarah touched his arm. Let them complain. Isabella has nothing to be ashamed of. But what if they expel me? Then you study at home until we find a better school, Sarah said firmly. We won't let other people's ignorance determine your future. That night, watching the show in the apartment with Mrs. Smith, the four felt united by something stronger than scandal or criticism. The interview had been a success, respectful, honest, and humanized. You all did very well, Mrs. Smith said, wiping proud tears. You showed that family is this. People who choose and support each other regardless of the circumstances, but their tranquility would not last long. The following Monday, David would receive a phone call that would shake the foundations of his carefully rebuilt life once again. The battle against prejudice and external pressures was just beginning, but at least now they would face everything hand in hand. As a true family, love had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The month of August arrived with cold winds and the promise of definitive changes. Sarah was 9 months along, and the twins seemed eager to meet the world, especially during the nights when their intense kicks kept her awake. On that Tuesday, August 15th, she woke up at 5 in the morning with a different pain in her lower back, more intense, more rhythmic. David had spent the night at the apartment, sharing the king-size bed with Sarah, who was now propped up on several pillows to find some comfort. Isabella was in the guest room, and Mrs. Smith had insisted on staying with them for the week, to be around when the babies decided to arrive, as she said with the wisdom of someone who had witnessed several births. "David," Sarah gently shook him, "I think it's starting." He woke up immediately, adrenaline rushing through his veins. "Are you sure? How are you feeling?" "Like someone is squeezing my lower back at regular intervals." Sarah tried to smile, but a new contraction made her grip his arm. David Thompson jumped out of bed and began putting on the clothes he had set aside, especially for this occasion. "I'm going to wake Isabella and Mrs. Smith. Can you get up?" "I can, but slowly." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, taking deep breaths. "David, I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Of not being a good mom, of not knowing what to do with 2 babies, of messing everything up." Tears began to stream down her face. "What if I can't love them enough to make up for their biological father's absence?" David knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Sarah Johnson, you are the strongest woman I know. You faced a pregnancy alone, dealt with all our family chaos, and endured the pressure of the media. If anyone in the world is prepared to be a mom, it's you. And will you be there? Even when they cry all night, when they get sick, when I don't know what to do anymore, I'll always be by your side. We'll figure out together how to be parents." David kissed her forehead. "And you're not alone. You have Isabella, Mrs. Smith, and soon 2 babies who will love you unconditionally." An hour later, they were at New York Hospital, in the private suite that David had reserved months earlier. Dr. Patricia Smith, Sarah's obstetrician, was already there, along with a full team of neonatologists specializing in premature twins. "How are the contractions, Sarah?" the doctor asked, checking dilation. "Stronger every hour. How much longer?" "By the progress, I would say your children will be born today, possibly by late afternoon." Isabella and Mrs. Smith arrived an hour later, carrying a suitcase with clothes and supplies that Mrs. Smith had insisted on preparing. The teenager was visibly nervous. Her own 4-month baby bump was starting to show, and witnessing Sarah's labor made her reflect on what awaited her in a few months. "How are you, dear?" Mrs. Smith asked, kissing Sarah's forehead. "Scared, anxious, excited, all at once." Sarah squeezed her mother-in-law's hand. "Mrs. Smith, thank you for being here. Child, there's no place in the world I would rather be today." The hours passed in a mix of pain, anticipation, and moments of calm between contractions. David never let go of Sarah's hand for a second, whispering words of encouragement, telling funny stories to distract her, promising her and the babies the world. Isabella watched everything with a mix of fascination and apprehension. "Sarah, does it hurt a lot?" "It hurts, but it's a purposeful pain. Each contraction brings me closer to meeting my children." Sarah smiled between pains. "When it's your turn, Bella, you'll understand. What if I can't be as brave as you?" "You will be. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done even when you're scared." At 5:43 p.m., during a golden sunset that painted New York through the hospital windows, the first baby was born, a boy weighing 2 kilograms and 800 grams, with dark hair and powerful lungs that announced his arrival to the world with indignant cries. "Our first child," David whispered, tears in his eyes as the doctor placed the baby on Sarah's chest. 10 minutes later, the second baby arrived. Another boy, slightly smaller, weighing 2 kilograms and 600 grams, but equally healthy and vocal about his opinion of the world outside the womb. "Michael and Gabriel," said Sarah, looking at the two little humans in her arms. "Michael Gabriel and Gabriel Michael Thompson." David laughed through his tears. "Thompson? They carry both families, yours and mine." In that moment, looking at Sarah holding their children, David felt a completeness he didn't know was possible. They weren't just two babies born that day. It was a whole family formed through improbable circumstances, but with unconditional love. Isabella approached shyly. Can I hold them?" "Of course, you're their big sister." When Isabella held Michael in her arms, something magical happened. The baby stopped crying and looked at her with newly opened eyes, as if instinctively recognizing the family connection. "Hi, my little brother," Isabella whispered. "I'm your sister Bella. I'll always protect you." Mrs. Smith watched the scene with proud tears running down her face. "Look at this beautiful family." 3 days later, when Sarah was discharged from the hospital, they returned to the Upper East Side apartment transformed into a true family home. David had hired a nurse specialized in newborns for the first few weeks, but it was clear he wanted to be part of every moment of raising the children. "David," Sarah said on their first night home, watching him change Gabriel's diaper with touching dedication, "you don't have to do everything. We can hire more. Help." "I don't want to hire help. I want to be a real dad this time." He looked at Isabella, who was feeding Michael. "I made many mistakes with Bella. I won't repeat them with Michael and Gabriel." "Dad," Isabella said, not taking her eyes off the baby, "you didn't make mistakes with me. You did the best you could at the time. And now I know how to do better." That night, when the babies finally fell asleep and Isabella went to her room, Sarah and David were left alone in the living room, exhausted but deeply happy. "David, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I love you. Not out of gratitude, not out of dependence, not out of convenience. I love you because you made me believe I deserve to be loved." David kissed her softly. "And I love you because you taught me that family isn't formed just by blood or marriage. It's formed by choice, by dedication, by unconditional love. And now we create our crazy and improbable family in the best way possible. And when they grow up, we'll tell Michael and Gabriel how two strangers met through a wrong connection and discovered that there is nothing more certain than true love." 3 months later, on a sunny November Saturday, Sarah and David got married in Central Park, in a simple ceremony with only close family and friends. Isabella looked beautiful as the maid of honor, her 7-month baby bump fitting perfectly in a light pink dress. Mrs. Smith cried throughout the ceremony. Michael and Gabriel slept peacefully in the arms of the best men during the vows. "Sarah," David said during the vows they had written together, "you called the wrong number and found the right love. I promise to love you in every call we will receive from life, in the easy and in the hard times." "David," Sarah replied, "you answered my desperate call and gave me hope. I promise to love you in every answer we will give together, as a family, as partners, as people who chose to love each other against all odds." When they kissed, sealing not only the marriage, but also a story that had begun with a wrong number and transformed into the most unlikely and perfect family in New York, the yellow IPE trees in the park seemed to bloom even more vibrantly, as if the city itself was celebrating the triumph of love over all adversities. And so, on a spring morning in New York, with the scent of jacaranda flowers in the air and the sound of babies laughing in the background, Sarah Johnson Thompson finally understood that sometimes the best things in life happen when we call the wrong number but talk to the right person.